It was just a choice. It was the choiciest choice that anyone ever chose to choose. It was a whole big choice. So hi guys, today I am going to be talking about Wolfsong by TJ Klune. And you know, I thought what better a place to film this video than in the woods with all the greenness, because this book really loved colour green. Just really liked to hammer in the fact that everything felt fucking green, so I thought I'd come out here and film in a place that feels green too. I have approximately 2 very small pages of notes. I listened to this book on audiobook. I hated it. This is not a good review. I have like virtually nothing good to say about this book, but I listened to it on audiobook. I didn't realise I was going to do a review until I finished, and then I was like, fuck, I need to talk about this book because I hated it. So here I am. So this is purely from memory, and the few quotes that I do have, I will be inserting at some point. Dramatic reading style, I guess, because I didn't bring them with me. So yeah, the few quotes I do have to support my argument are very small, and everything else will be off the top of my head. That's not going to stop me making this review. Clearly, as you can see, I wasn't prepared to listen to that like 16 hours audiobook all over again, because I didn't want to. No, please. Yeah, so where do I go from here? Summarising the book, that would be a good idea. This book essentially is a werewolf supernatural romance that follows the main character Oxnard Matheson, but everyone calls him Ox, so I'm going to be calling him Ox. He lives in this tiny little town called Green Creek, which I pictured as one of those like yeehaw towns, you know, where all the Sweet Home Alabama is played. And Ox is living his life. When he was very young, Ox's father kind of ditched the family, so it's just Ox and his mum now. Ox's father kind of put in his head, "You're always going to get shit," is the quote that gets repeated multiple times throughout the book. Just so much that it hurts my head, but like I get the point that it was, yeah. Yeah, so he's always going to get shit and he's stupid, and that's what his dad left him with, which is a beautiful present. We love it. When Ox is 16, he meets this 10-year-old boy called Joe, and Joe kind of just jumps on Ox, as 10-year-olds do, I mean. And he like smells him and he says, "Oh my god, you smell so nice." And then he essentially just kind of takes Ox to his house and introduces him to his parents and stuff. Well, to cut a long story short, the Bennetts, because Joe's family surname is Bennett, they've moved into this house that's like right down the road from Ox's, and it's been vacant for ages, and so they've come back to town after years and years. They're werewolves, and Joe, this 10-year-old boy, is soulmates with Ox, who is 16. And that was where my problems began with the book, but we'll leave that for last. The relationship in this is like the last thing I'm going to talk about, because it's the thing that pissed me off the most in this book. But first I'm going to talk about the writing, which I don't have a lot to say about. I just have like one problem with it. I will insert a dramatic reading. I made a mock-up of what the paragraph looks like that pissed me off, because I don't actually have like a proper copy of it, but I made something that you'll just understand. Look, I'm going to put it in here. "Ox," he said, "I like you." He said, "A lot." He said, "More than a lot." He said, "I like your smell." He said, "It's so nice." He said, "Do you want to go to lunch?" He said, "I'll pay." He said, "We could get pizza." He said, "We could see a movie." He said, "Or go on a walk." He said. Okay, so now that you've watched that, just like the writing was just repetitive at times. Like I said, he said, she said, etc. It just said. I'm like, bruh. I know they tell you to use said more than any other kind of murmured, grumbled, mumbled, this kind of thing. But not to that extent. It was just like repetitive, and it's like, it's awful. It's horrible writing, okay? It was just bad. Like, you could have literally just taken out the seds and just had a paragraph of this person talking, you know? Why were the seds necessary? The seds made me want to, like, shoot myself in the foot. I mean, the whole book made me want to shoot myself in the foot, but not, like... But the writing just... Oh, my God. It didn't happen, like, so many times that it was, like, something that I couldn't, like, stand, obviously, because I listened to the whole thing. But, like, it still happened enough that I was just like, why is this a thing? Did you not have it edited? Who are they? Can I sue them? Why? Like, who? Like, oh, the writing just pissed me off. And there were a lot of, like, kind of other instances. There were a lot of words that were repeated. Like I said, they really hammered home this thing that's, like, feeling green. Like, everything felt green. Like, green is supposed to be this safety thing in the book. It's always like, oh, it felt green. I don't really know what to make of that. It didn't particularly bother me, but, like, it was there a lot. And I was like, could you not find another way to, like, show me this? Like, you're just telling me everything feels fucking green, and I'm like, I don't give a shit, dude. I'm starting to hate the colour green, and I live in the countryside. What am I going to do? I'm not entirely sure if I should save this for the second, for, like, when I talk about the romantic relationship, but I think it counts as part of the writing, because when the romance kind of starts happening, and, like, Ox and Joe finally do the devil's tango, and get down and dirty, and, you know, all that stuff, you know, men... You know when you read a sex scene, or like a something scene, and you just know it's been written by a man? Well, this was what the sex scenes were like in this book. They used the word spunk, S-P... K? Is it K? K-U-N-K? Spunk? I mean, that doesn't have a K in it. Oh my God, I can't spell. Spunk. They used the word spunk in the sex scene. Remember the quote, right? It was, spunk dribbled down my chin, or something. And I'm like, dude... What are you trying to do? How is that sexy? The light is changing a lot. I don't think I thought this through very well. That's fine. You can live with it. How is that sexy? It's not sexy hearing spunk dribbling down your chin. But men, I guess, because men are strange. I don't have the exact quote because, like I said, didn't take notes. But it talked about one of the characters' arsehole hair right before the other character, like, ate him out. And I'm just like... But was that an image I really needed? Is that sexy? Do people like arsehole hair? Do they like the idea of someone licking arsehole hair? Do they? If so, why? Please enlighten me. Well, I don't. I just don't want to know. But why?
Hell, I just have one question. What? Why?
There are, like, a lot of quotes and, like, stuff that I could pull from the sex scene, like balls lying against his thigh. I'm like, I don't want to know where his balls are lying. Things like that, but I'm just gonna move on because that was the writing, and that was just I've read fan fiction, ABO fan fiction with knotting and all that other stuff that is sexier than this, and those aren't even officially published or well written. This is supposed to be officially published and well written, but whatever, I'm moving on. We're going away from the writing now because I have to film this all before my camera runs out of battery. I guess the next thing I want to talk about is the characters, although really I don't have anything to say about the characters. I didn't feel emotionally attached to any of them, and to be honest, the only character that I really have anything to say about is the villain, who is this dude called Richard. To, like, I guess elaborate on, like, why Richard is the villain. When Joe, this little werewolf boy, was very young, he kind of got kidnapped and tortured by Richard for a reason I can't remember because I did not care. And essentially, the Bennett pack, the Bennetts, Joe's parents and everything, they went and, you know, rescued Joe, and they imprisoned Richard in this, like, magical cage, because all werewolf packs have witches that work for them for some reason, which wasn't explained, but maybe that's something that I just didn't pay attention to. But all werewolf packs have witches, so they imprisoned Richard in this, like, cage thing and left him there instead of killing him as they should have. I'm just saying, like, from the moment he was mentioned to be in a cage, I was like, oh, he's going to escape then. You know, I just leave you with that. But anyway, as I said, Richard escapes, and Richard comes back as the bad guy, and Richard's aim is to kind of become the alpha of, like, the Bennett pack of werewolves. Joe and his parents, and then there's a few other people who I don't remember, but they were there in the story and they were part of the pack. But it was kind of irrelevant to me because I didn't care. But Richard, yeah, like, his aim is to become the alpha of this pack because something. But, like, it's weird. He was such, like, a empty shell. Like, I felt like the author had kind of gone, okay, what's the worst thing that I can have Richard say for maximum shock value or something? Because Richard's thing was going, I'm gonna rape you. I guess it's supposed to be threatening, but it was just kind of like he repeated it so many times. Not that I'm laughing at rape or anything, but it was just like, he was like, I'm gonna rape your pack into submission. I'm gonna rape Joe and break his fingers. So it's like, okay, do you have anything else you're gonna say? Like, are you smart? Do you have like mind games you're playing? Like, no, he just wants to rape people. I don't get it. Like, it wasn't scary. I guess it should have been scary, but it wasn't. Like, I feel like it was put in there as an attempt to be like this horrifying thing, but all he was saying were these words, and he was actually like the most pathetic villain ever. But that's like all I could tell you about his character, is that he wanted to rape people and he wanted to become the alpha. And as for like Ox, I found Ox, I guess, boring, but like, yeah. I guess, I mean, I understand Ox's character more. Like, I get like his character makes more sense to me than anything else. Because he had this whole thing about how his dad had told him he was shit, and so now he's always thinking like, oh, his dad had told him he was shit, and it's kind of a thing that constantly plays throughout his mind. It pissed me off that it played so much, but I guess it also made sense that it played so much in his head, you know? Joe was annoying and I hated him and I thought he was possessive and toxic, but we'll get into that when I talk about the relationship. And everyone else in the book I literally did not care about, and I don't even remember. Like, there was this witch dude who owned a garage in the town, and he was like Ox's sort of semi like new father figure dude. He wasn't like with the mum or anything, but he was just kind of like, I feel like he'd taken over a bit when Ox's dad abandoned them. I guess the one thing that I do have to say is I don't remember who it was, because I don't remember the names and I don't care enough to look it up, but there was this one scene, because Ox is bisexual, and Ox hasn't like quite come out as bisexual, but he ends up coming out to one... There's a car. It's gone now. He ends up coming out to one of the Bennett pack werewolves, who are like, you know, the minor characters in the background. Car. Let's call him Josh. That wasn't his name, but let's call him Josh. In this scene that happened, it just was a bizarre scene to me. In this scene that happened, Josh and Ox were sitting in the car together, like, you know, chatting or whatever, and Ox is like, oh, I'm bisexual. Josh is like, oh, I'm straight. And then they end up kind of like, the conversation like progresses to like, Ox, have you ever kissed anyone? And Ox is like, no. And Josh just like kisses him. And again, I think that's such a dude thing to write. It's such a man thing to write. It's like, oh, you haven't kissed anyone? Well, I'm just gonna kiss you here then. I'm like, bitch, if I was a girl and that happened to me, if I was a girl, I am a girl. I'm a girl, and if that happened to me, like, I just don't get, like, the logic there. Like, why the fuck would you just kiss someone just because they've never been kissed? That's not, like, it's just stupid. And also, I thought it was also weird because he'd also said he was straight. Not that it would make it any, like, non-weirder if, like, he hadn't been straight, but it was just, you know, it's just a bizarre thing to add in there, as though it's just like, oh, well, I'll just kiss you then. Ox wasn't particularly bothered about it. And the only time it was addressed after that was when he told Mrs. Bennett, like Joe's mother, about it, and she was like, oh, all werewolves are kind of fluid. Okay? That doesn't excuse kissing someone just randomly. Like, I just thought it was a weird thing to put in there, you know? It's not like a huge deal, it's just, that was one of the things that kind of particularly irritated me about the book. So yeah, Josh was a bit of a prick. It was just strange, you know? What else do my notes say? I guess I should move on to the plot of the book now. I don't really have much to say about the plot, besides I thought it was very weak in terms of like everything. The first like half of the book was basically just Ox meeting the Bennett pack. He hung out with them loads before they told him that they were werewolves. Like, for 3 years. I swear to God, it was 3 years. And then they told him that they were werewolves and stuff. You know, that's all cool and fine and dandy. But they didn't tell him that he was soulmates with Joe until like 8 years after they'd met or something. Some ridiculous number of years. They didn't tell him. Like, throughout this book, there is quite a few times, I can't particularly name them specifically, but there are quite a few times. Notice how I can't name things specifically to support my argument. Aren't I prepared? But there were a few times when it was just like the Bennetts would purposely not tell Ox something. I just think that's toxic, considering they had this whole kind of, we're pack, we're family, you're family now, you're pack, and yet they'd purposely leave shit out and not tell him things. And I'm just like, okay, dude, we're pack, we're family, okay, guys. But beyond that, like, yeah, like I said, the first, like, half of the book or something was literally just them kind of meeting and hanging out. Not to mention, they had a time skip kind of quite soon after he met them. and then it kind of just glossed over like them actually getting to know each other. So I kind of felt cheated. Like, I didn't get to see their relationship blossom. It was just like, well, they know each other now. So I just kind of felt a bit robbed of that. But then again, maybe I just wasn't paying attention because I didn't care. Shit was not green enough for me. So yeah, big chunk of the book is literally just nothing happening until I think it was around the time Ox was finally told that him and Joe were like soulmates. Basically, Richard escapes from his like magical cage bullshit, comes to like fight because he's scary and he wants to rape everyone, and that is his entire personality. He like starts this fight and he essentially kills Ox's mum, and then he tries to kill Bob Bennett, the leader of the Bennett werewolf pack, who is Joe's father, and essentially he wounds him to the point where like Bob will die. So to stop Richard becoming the alpha of the Bennett pack, Joe has to kill his own father, like deliver the final blow, because that's how werewolf alpha passing on stuff works. I don't know. That was one of the only things that I kind of liked about the book. I thought it was like, that would have been a cool impact on the story if I cared about any of the characters. So essentially Joe is now the alpha of the Bennett pack. Richard runs off for some reason. I guess he just didn't bring enough manpower with him, so he just couldn't finish the fight he'd started. Because around this time, Joe and Ox have finally started to kind of acknowledge their like romantic feelings for each other. But anyway, that's like kind of besides the point, because Joe decides he's going to go and hunt down Richard and murder him. Which, fair enough, like I feel like that's what should have been done in the start, like before the book even began. But who am I to say? We needed a plot. And so Joe essentially ditches half of the Bennett pack and leaves them in like the Green Creek with Ox, and he goes off with the other half of the Bennett pack to go and hunt Richard. And I think it takes them 3 years. They hunt for 3 years and they don't find him. And throughout these 3 years, Joe keeps in touch with Ox for like 2 of the years, and then he just like cuts off contact and leaves Ox like alone, like with no like information, no like updates, no nothing, like nothing. He just ditches Ox, even though they're supposed to be soulmates, but I mean, who cares about non-toxic relationships, am I right? So he ditches Ox for a year. And during this year, like near the end of like I think that the last year that Joe was away, this random like bunch of werewolves show up and they kidnap like Ox's ex-girlfriend, and Ox then goes and like takes what's left of the Bennett pack and goes and like beats the shit out of the like werewolves for kidnapping his girlfriend, as you do. Anyway, right after they've like killed the werewolves, there's this weird thing that happens that is like totally unexplained, and this is why I absolutely hate, like this is one of my biggest pet peeves. I'm so sure I didn't miss anything, but it was just like the most like cop-out, like useless bullshit that I'd like heard in a book. Suddenly Ox, even though Ox is human, Ox was now the alpha of the half of the Bennett pack that had been left in Green Creek. And I'm like, how does that work? Because that would be an interesting like thing. It's like, okay, well, why is he, well, how did he do that? Like, he's a human, da-da-da. And literally the explanation for this was given by Mrs. Bennett, Joe's mum, and she's just like, I guess some people just have a werewolf inside of them. Some people just have a wolf in their spirit. I'm like, yeah, and I have like turtles in my toes. What the fuck do you mean? Like, yeah, I'm a cat. Doesn't mean I can lead all my cats. Like, if I missed something, then please tell me, because I would love to think that the writer wasn't that lazy, or maybe it gets elaborated on in other books. But I feel like it's kind of like, if that's going to be elaborated on, why have this explanation now, But anyway, Ox just has a wolf inside of him. And then Joe comes back. And so it's kind of a bit tense, because Joe is like an alpha, and now Ox is like a human alpha, even though that makes no fucking sense. There's just tenseness. And also Ox is angry at Joe, rightfully so. Very rightfully so. But anyway, basically, it's kind of a bit weird, this part, because this is another one of those things that's it bugs me. I didn't actually notice this until I read like a Goodreads review, because Ox didn't want to forgive Joe at first. He was kind of pissed, and he was gonna stay pissed. Everyone was kind of telling Ox to just go and be with Joe because they were soulmates, and so therefore he should like just forgive him. Like, there was just a lot of those vibes and the stuff like that. It's just like, we were soulmates, so it's fine. And there are some other things to do with that I will talk about in the romance section. But for now, basically Ox and Joe end up banging, and then like I don't know, maybe a few weeks pass or something, and then Richard shows up. Like, after the 3 years of Joe hunting him, like, Joe comes back to the town, and then finally Richard shows up again, like, oh my god. He essentially kidnaps, like, 6 people from the town, and he blackmails Ox into meeting him alone. And so Ox just, like, goes and does that. And I should probably explain around this point that throughout the book there's this weird bond that werewolves have where they can kind of, like, semi-read each other's, like, emotions, that kind of thing. Like, it's not reading thoughts, but they can tell, like, when the other one is distressed. And Ox has this connection because he's a wolf at heart. So Ox kind of, like, shuts this connection off so they can't tell that he's distressed or anything when he goes to meet Richard. And Richard essentially just ends up breaking Ox's wrist, and then because of the pain, Ox accidentally opens up those, like, emotional floodgates or whatever, and all the wolves can feel how he feels, and they all come running, and there's, like, a fight that goes down with Richard, and Ox gets, like, punched through the stomach, which was my favourite part of the book, because I was ready for everyone to die. Unfortunately, he didn't die. And then, like, basically, like, Richard punches Ox through the stomach, and Joe just rips Richard's head off, and then that's the end, and it's just like, well, we had all of that just for the villain to die, like, so quickly. I just felt very dissatisfied with that. And then Ox was, like, turned into a werewolf. It was kind of like in Twilight, at the end of the first book, when Bella, like, gets bitten and she almost bleeds out. Only this is, like, if Edward chose to just let her become a vampire. This whole book felt like werewolf Twilight, you know. Only I like Twilight better because I was stupid when I read that book. And so, yeah, then Ox is a werewolf, and the epilogue is literally just him and Joe fucking for the first time. And I'm just like, okay. It just felt so sudden and weird. There's been kind of like a build-up around Ox's and Joe's kind of like when they're gonna mate, or have sex for the first time. So I was expecting something a bit grander than just like a quick add-on epilogue of them having sex for the first time. Because there was this whole thing where Ox didn't want to have sex with Joe because then he was scared Joe would, like, be more hurt if Ox died at some point. But it was like I had this kind of like, oh, it's going to be a big occasion kind of thing. And then it was just like, nah, they just had sex in the epilogue, and the epilogue was like 2 pages or something. It was really short. I don't know, it was just weird and like anticlimactic. Like, the whole book was anticlimactic. Most of the plot was boring, and the rest of it didn't make sense, and the villain was weak as shit. And I guess that brings me on to the romance, but I don't know if I'm going to actually be able to talk about that because my camera is dying, and I didn't think this through, and I didn't bring my charger. So we're going out of the green place now. Funny that I have more notes on the romance than I do on the plot in general. Oh, my nose is running. It is 3 or 4 days later. I am back to talk about the romance in Wolfsong at last. I suppose the first thing that we're going to talk about is the age gap. I couldn't possibly fathom why a roughly 33-year-old author would want to write about a 23-year-old dude thirsting over a 17-year-old dude's abs. Like, I just don't quite, like, can't put my finger on why that's kind of creepy to me, but you know, I'll let you think about it for yourselves. I guess to recap or whatever, Joe met Ox when Joe was 10 years old. Joe imprinted on Ox, and Ox was 16. But things didn't get sexual until Joe was 17 and Ox was 22 to 23 years old. But even then, it's just kind of like a strange thing. Like, I know Joe was only a year away from being 18 and of age, but it was still just strange. Like, the only reason I can think of to have that age gap is so that they didn't immediately have sex, because it was kind of acknowledged in the book that Ox was like, oh my god, he's 17 and I'm 23. And so they didn't really do anything. They kissed once while Joe was 17, but it was still just strange to me. I have a quote from my friend that I feel just sums up everything. It says, "Bro, what? They need better morals. That's the shit that made Jacob imprint on a newborn baby." You know what, like, I agree. I think it's a weird thing to write about. Why would you want to promote, like, low-key underage relationships? Like, couldn't you just had them be, like, similar age? Like, what would that have done to the story? Besides, kept them from having sex. And even then, you could totally have worked the plot, just, like, tweaked the plot a little bit, and they wouldn't have had sex anyway. You don't need, like, an age gap for that. Like, it was just a weird age gap. So that existed in the book, and that was my, like, big problem. Because I knew coming into the book, because I'd read a negative review of the book, so I knew coming into the book that I was probably going to have problems with it. But I'm one of those people that I hear like a book is kind of controversial, and then I'm nosy and I want to like make my opinion on it. Not to mention my friend had recommended me Wolfsong to read, and she was like, oh my god, this is my favourite book. So, well, there's that. She doesn't watch my videos, but like if she did, then, well, like none of the adults in the book cared about the age gap. They were all just like, oh, well, they're soulmates, so it's fine. Sure, they're soulmates, but I'm 17, okay? Imagine if a 23-year-old dude came up to me and started like dating me, or like wanting to date me or something. Frankly, actually, Ox was the more decent one in this relationship. Joe was the one who was really pushing for that underage sex kind of thing. He had a lot of moments where he was like uber sexual once Ox like found out that he was, you know, the soulmates. So Joe was the one pushing it, but still, it was just, I just don't like it. Like, I just feel like the book could have completely survived without it. Like, you could have had Joe be 18. That's all I'm saying. Just to like explain, the first time that Ox and Joe got like sexual, or like things started to get sexual, was on like this sweaty hot summer's day when Ox went over to the Bennett's house, and Joe like kind of came back from some like trip. Maybe he'd been on a hunt or he'd been swimming or something, but he was wearing like shorts that basically, as Ox put it, hung low and were like too small or something like that, and his abs were all sweaty, and suddenly Joe was a man in Ox's eyes. And like, where did the little boy go? Don't quote me on this, but I think Ox like got a boner and then had to run off into the woods, and this other like werewolf dude kind of ran after him and was like, oh yeah, by the way, because Ox has never been told they're soulmates at this point, and this werewolf is like, yeah, by the way, you guys are soulmates and you're gonna fuck one day, and I know you have a boner for him, dude. That was just how it was. You know, it was just weird. And then like once Joe found out that Ox like finally knew, Joe started being like weird and like sexual, as I've said. There was like some scene at the dinner table that night. I'm pretty sure Joe like put his fingers in his mouth and like sucked them. There was something weird that went on there where he was being sexual on purpose, but like subtly sexual to make Ox uncomfortable. And then I think it was also that night they ended up having a conversation. It was a little odd because, and I know this is a werewolf book, by the way, so I'm like well aware that like dogs in real life are these whiny little shits that are just like irritating, and they're needy and they're like possessive and stuff. So I understand how that bleeds into a werewolf story, but I'm just not like down with the whole like possessive doggy nature that some werewolf stories put in there, you know? Where was I? I have 3 quotes here that I'm pretty sure Joe said. I'm not sure if it was this night or if it was other times, but either way it works because he said weird stuff this night. So the quotes go, I had to stop myself from tearing you apart. You're amazing and beautiful, and sometimes I want to put my teeth in you just to watch you bleed. I want to know what you taste like. I don't want anyone to touch you ever again. There are times when all I can think of is marking you so that everyone knows who you belong to carve my name into your skin so you can never forget me. I have to protect what's mine. I want to claim you. I want to give you scars with my claws. I want my teeth embedded in your neck. You're mine. No one else can have you. No one else can be with you. You hear me, Ox? Not ever, and I'll kill anyone who thinks they can take you away from me. And those were my 3 quotes of the day, because those are the only ones that I could find in Goodreads reviews, because I did not take notes myself. So he says stuff like that to Ox, and Ox is just like, meh. And there was also this bizarre kind of thing that went on where like Joe tried to be werewolf Edward Cullen, and he was kind of like, I think I'll hurt you. And like me, after hearing those 3 quotes, was like, yeah, dude, I think you will too. Like, if you want to have like weird kinky sex and do roleplay and stuff, that is fine. That is your business and stuff. It's just not my thing, so I didn't enjoy reading about any of that. But my thing is like, because Joe is a werewolf, this isn't roleplay, this is like real. I had a problem with it because obviously this isn't like roleplay, because Joe is a werewolf who is possessive, so this was like actual possessive stuff as opposed to just someone role-playing and then being nice in real life. Possessive werewolves just aren't my thing. Like, I'm happy to read about werewolves who are just humans who can turn into wolves, but I don't want to read about a person who is like a dog. Like, I'm not a dog person. In fact, I don't even know if I want to read about a person who's like a cat. You know, I just don't want to read about a person who is dickish like an animal. At the end of the book, there is this random sex scene, as I mentioned before, the epilogue, and he actually like bites Ox and makes him bleed, and I was just like, so I just don't think werewolf stories are my thing, and I also don't think biting someone and making them bleed during sex is nice. If you want that, sure, but just do you. There was also another quote that I don't have written down, but I texted my friend about it, and I essentially said, one of the love interests told the other love interest that he wants to bite him just to watch him bleed, and that he wants to taste his blood, and that he wants to tear him open and crawl inside him. Lots of crying emojis. So that was a thing that happened too. He said he wanted to crawl inside him and break him open and stuff. So I don't know why I'm supposed to root for these characters at all. The next thing I wanted to talk about. Okay, so there is a part in this book where both Joe and Ox lose a parent, and it's at the same time, essentially. And Ox is struggling and stuff, and understandably Joe is struggling, but Joe decides he's going to break the pack in half and go and hunt down this dude who'd killed their parents as revenge. And he leaves Ox alone for 3 years. He leaves Ox for 3 years, even though they're supposed to be soulmates, even though Ox has just lost his mother and Joe has just lost his father. But Joe decides he's going to go off and leave his supposed soulmate alone to cope with this. Ox had like half of the pack, because Joe took half of the pack, but like, it's not the same, you know? Like, if you're soulmates with someone, how could you... I get it, Joe was struggling, because obviously he'd lost his father, but it just felt like a thing that was there, and I wasn't okay with it, because it didn't feel like something that I wanted to support, especially seeing as, apparently, I don't actually remember this myself, but I also don't remember anyone apologising, so I'm going to read you a part of a Goodreads review that I found that essentially says, I couldn't bring myself to like Joe despite of everything he went through and regardless of his reasons for abandoning Ox for 3 years, because Joe is emotionally abusive to Ox, just like his father was. And not once after coming back home, even after he admits he was wrong to leave Ox behind, does Joe apologise, not once. At one point he even tells Ox that it was done and he couldn't take it back, meaning Ox should just shut up and accept him because he loves Ox so much, and that apparently justifies everything. It grated me that the reader is force-fed this relationship as being loving and romantic when it's anything but. I agree. If you wanted me to support this couple, have him make some other mistake. Ditching the person you're supposed to be soulmates with for 3 years, just so you can go on a revenge hunt that doesn't actually even succeed, and then you don't even apologise for it. It's just like, dude, I don't even like you. You know, like, if you're supposed to be soulmates and love each other, you're supposed to support each other. Joe didn't do that, and I know Joe was 17 and struggling and stuff, but it was just, I didn't like it, so I had issues. And what makes it worse is what I call the tether bullshit. A tether to a werewolf is essentially someone who can pull them back from the brink of never being able to turn from a wolf into a human again. They can descend into their like animalistic side and never be able to come back. But the tether essentially, I think, helps them come back. You know, it's like, oh, true love conquers all stuff, you know, that kind of thing. And that's all very well. That's a nice idea. It's great that you have like this thing where you can think, oh my God, I love this person so much. I will always be able to think of them and they will help me ground myself. Like, that's nice. What isn't nice is the fact that they made it, like, Ox's duty to be the tether of the Bennett pack. It was like it was his job. Just because he could. Because Joe uses this to guilt trip Ox into staying in the town while Joe goes and hunts his revenge. He tells Ox this is why he should stay in the town. I mean, there was probably some other stuff, but this was the part that I focused on, because he was like, well, you're the only one who can, like, pull them back, Ox. You have to stay here. And I'm like, because it's obviously this human's job to deal with a pack that is falling apart, that doesn't even really deserve him because they keep omitting information. They didn't tell him things. They omitted information constantly. It was just, dude. I have another Goodreads quote that also goes along with this, which essentially, this was from a review, and it said, the way the Bennett pack dealt with Ox and what he meant to Joe also nagged at me. The fact that they expected Ox to fix Joe bothered me immensely. That's not how trauma works. I don't care if Joe's a werewolf or not. His dependency on Ox was toxic and obsessive. Even from a young age. I get it, he was a possessive werewolf, but even for a shifter, it was too much. Now, like the fixing Joe part in that review, it applies to something else I wanted to say, which was previously, like when Joe first met Ox when he was 10 and Ox was 16, Joe hadn't spoken for years because of the trauma Richard had put him through, and suddenly when he meets Ox, he suddenly just starts speaking again, just like gabbling, you know, like just suddenly click, like a switch was flipped. He just talked again. There was no gradualness about it or anything. He just literally just, and then he talked again. Because apparently Ox, being his soulmate, fixes shit. Also, when Ox is there, when Joe is sleeping, Joe doesn't get nightmares about the time anymore. Ox just like cures Joe's nightmares. That's like a sweet idea, but it's bullshit. It also makes me think of Harden Scott and how like Tessa from After by Anna Todd made his nightmares go away, because that is how mental trauma works, apparently. Like, it's a sweet idea, I said, but it's not realistic. Ox kind of just cured Joe, or fixed him, as the thing said. It was like he was supposed to fix him. He was the one who was supposed to do this stuff because he was his soulmate. No, that's not how, like, loving relationships work. You still have to deal with your own shit. Your soulmate is there to support you, and that's about it. So that was a thing that happened in the book a lot, and I wasn't comfortable with it. There was also this random kind of throwaway paragraph, which ties into Joe's general possessiveness of Ox. Joe got jealous because Ox's girlfriend became part of the werewolf pack, which I don't think Joe has any fucking right to be, for one thing, because you can be friends with your ex if you want. Not to mention, Ox's ex had almost been murdered by werewolves, so obviously she became part of the werewolf pack. It happened while Joe had ditched them for 3 years, so he didn't get any fucking say in this at all. It's just a paragraph like after they'd kind of fondled each other for the first time, where Joe was like, why is she part of the pack? Ox was like, oh, are you jealous? And that was kind of just all that happened, but still Joe had that thing where he was like, why is she part of the pack? And I was like, well, why wouldn't she be part of the pack? She almost got murdered. So that happened. It was never really addressed after that, I don't think, so... But it was still a thing that happened and it annoyed me. What else do I have to talk about? The last thing that I kind of have to talk about, I guess, is Ox and his weird, well, if me and Joe have sex and I die, then Joe will be more heartbroken than if we didn't have sex and I die. I don't even know what it was supposed to be, really, like, I haven't had sex, so maybe this is all just crap that I've made up in my head. But maybe it's a werewolf thing. If it's a werewolf thing, I think that's stupid, but whatever. Ox, like, yeah, he didn't want to have sex with Joe because he was worried that Joe would be, like, way more upset if Ox died. Even though they're soulmates, like, what, he's going to be devastated anyway. Like, is it really going to make a difference? But anyway, because of this being in the plot, I had an expectation that the sex that they would have eventually would somehow be, like, built up. Like, this great big, like, thing, because Ox was like, okay, I'm not going to do it because I think that Joe will be upset. And then, like, once the fight is over, then the book essentially ends, and the epilogue, extremely short and extremely just tacked onto the end. It was just there. By the way, they had sex, and then it was the end. I don't know, it just felt weirdly added on to me. It felt like it didn't fit. It was just strange. To summarise, I didn't like the age gap. I thought that was weird and unnecessary. I didn't like how Joe treated Ox. I don't care if Joe was my age. I'm my age, and I know how to treat people. And I know everyone is different. That's cool. But as a story, it's not something that I wanted to read about. You know? Didn't like the tether thing because it was used to kind of manipulate Ox. The whole sex thing just wasn't my thing. I don't know, like, if you guys find it sexy to hear about someone rubbing spit into someone else's asshole. But just personally, I don't want to read about that. Yeah, it just felt like it was very much written by a dude. I think that's the end of my review. I guess the good things that came from this was the fact that I managed to cross off something on my bingo card because I had to read something recommended by a friend, and also a book that I thought I'd hate, and I went into this book thinking I'd hate it, and I was absolutely right. But I wanted to give my friend the benefit of the doubt, and now I just don't want to read anything that she ever recommends me ever again. But yeah, I'm gonna go now. I don't know how to end this. This ending is awkward no matter how I have it, so bye. I'm reading.